November 17, 2018. The sun rises over the Bay of Bengal, painting the water gold. 7 fishermen huddle on their boat, their faces pale with fear. They cannot stop staring at the beach in the distance. Through their binoculars, they watch something that will haunt them forever. A group of figures dragging a body across the sand. The body wears modern clothing. The figures do not. They are pulling the corpse toward the jungle. And then, with crude tools in their bare hands, they begin to dig. The fishermen want to help. They want to intervene, but they cannot. Because the island they are watching is the most dangerous place on planet Earth. A place where the outside world is forbidden. A place protected not by walls or weapons, but by people who have said no to civilization for 60,000 years. The body being buried belongs to a 26-year-old American. His name was John Allen Chau, and he died trying to do something no one had successfully done before. He died trying to reach the unreachable. This is North Sentinel Island, 5 miles long, 3 miles wide, 60 square kilometers of dense jungle surrounded by coral reefs and crystal blue water. It looks like paradise from above, but it is a paradise with a terrible reputation. Everyone who has tried to visit uninvited has faced the same fate. Arrows, violence, death. The people who live here are called the Sentinelese. Scientists estimate there are between 50 and 400 of them. No one knows for sure, because no one has ever been allowed to stay long enough to count. They speak a language no outsider understands. They live as their ancestors lived 10,000 years ago, maybe longer. No agriculture, no metal tools, no contact with the modern world, and they want to keep it that way. For decades, this island has been sealed off by the Indian government. It is illegal to go within 3 miles of the shore. The Coast Guard patrols the waters. Signs warn visitors to stay away. But John Allen Chau did not stay away. He went closer than anyone should have gone, and the island gave him an answer. But why? Why would a young man with his whole life ahead of him risk everything to visit a place that promised only danger? Why would he ignore the warnings, break the law, and step onto a beach where others had died? The answer lies in a dream he had carried since he was a teenager. A dream that seemed noble and pure. A dream that would cost him everything. Every clue fades unless you keep it alive. Faded clues tell forgotten stories. Keep them alive. Subscribe today. Because what happened to John Allen Chau is not just a story about one man and one island. It is a story about belief and boundaries. About faith and fear. About the line between courage and recklessness. And about what happens when two worlds collide. Worlds that were never meant to meet. The fishermen watched the Sentinelese finish burying the body. Then the tribespeople disappeared back into the jungle, swallowed by the green shadows. The beach was empty again. Silent. As if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something that would spark a global debate. Something that would force us to ask difficult questions. Questions about who has the right to visit whom. About whether good intentions justify dangerous actions. About whether some places should remain forever out of reach. John Allen Chau is still there, on that beach, under the sand. His body was never recovered. The Indian government decided it was too dangerous to try. The Sentinelese made their position clear. The island remains forbidden. So how did we get here? How did a young man from America end up buried on an island that the rest of the world has agreed to leave alone? To understand that, we need to go back. Back to where this story really begins. Back to a boy with a dream, and an island that haunted his imagination. John Allen Chau was born in 1991 in Alabama to Chinese-American parents. From a young age, he was different. While other kids played video games, John wanted to be outside, camping, hiking, exploring. He devoured books about explorers and adventurers. People who went to the ends of the earth and came back with stories. But John was not just an adventurer. He was also deeply religious. His family attended church regularly, and John took his faith seriously. Very seriously. He believed that sharing his beliefs was not just important. It was essential. He believed that everyone deserved to hear about Jesus Christ, no matter where they lived, or how isolated they were. In high school, John learned about a place that combined both of his passions. Exploration and faith. He learned about North Sentinel Island. It was in a geography class. His teacher mentioned it almost in passing. An island in the Indian Ocean where a tribe lived completely cut off from modern civilization. A tribe that had never been successfully contacted. A tribe that violently rejected all outsiders. Most students forgot about it the moment class ended. But John did not forget. He went home and researched everything he could find. The more he read, the more obsessed he became. Here was a group of people who had never heard of Christianity, who had never been given the chance to accept or reject it. John believed they deserved that chance, and he believed God was calling him to give it to them. His friends thought it was just a teenage fantasy, something he would grow out of. But John did not grow out of it. If anything, his determination grew stronger. After high school, John attended Oral Roberts University in Oklahoma, a Christian institution known for its emphasis on missionary work. He studied sports medicine, thinking it might be useful in remote areas. He took survival training courses. He learned basic emergency medical care. Everything he did, every choice he made, was preparation. But he was not reckless. Not yet. John knew that walking onto North Sentinel Island unprepared would be suicide. So he decided to gain experience first, to learn how to approach isolated tribes, to understand what worked and what did not. In his early 20s, John traveled to Mexico, Iraq, and South Africa on missionary trips. He worked with remote communities. He learned how to build trust, how to communicate across language barriers, how to be patient. These trips taught him valuable lessons, but they also reinforced his belief that he could reach anyone, anywhere, if he just tried hard enough. In 2015 and 2016, John visited the Andaman Islands. This is the archipelago where North Sentinel Island is located, but he did not go to the Sentinelese, not yet. Instead, he visited other tribes in the region, tribes that had some contact with the outside world. He spent time with them, learned about their cultures, and practiced his approach. It was during these trips that his plan began to take shape, a plan to visit North Sentinel Island, a plan that everyone told him was impossible. His friends warned him. His family begged him not to go. Even other missionaries, people who dedicated their lives to spreading their faith, told him it was too dangerous, that it was not worth the risk. But John believed it was worth it. He believed that the Sentinelese souls were at stake. He believed that if he did not try, no one would. He believed that God would protect him. So in 2018, John made his final preparations. He took 13 different vaccines to protect himself from diseases. He underwent wilderness first aid training. He practiced kayaking for hours, knowing he might need to paddle to shore alone. He even spent 11 days in complete isolation on a small island in the Andamans, fasting and praying, preparing himself mentally and spiritually for what he was about to do. He wrote in his journal constantly during this time, page after page of prayers, plans, and doubts. Yes, doubts, because John was not blind to the danger. He knew he might die. He wrote about his fears, about the possibility that he would never come home. But he also wrote about his conviction, his belief that this was what he was meant to do. In one entry he wrote, quote, "You might think I am crazy, but I think it is worth it to declare Jesus to these people." End quote. John was ready. The island was waiting. And in November 2018, he would finally attempt what he had been planning for nearly a decade. He would try to reach the unreachable. He would try to cross a boundary that had held for thousands of years. But before we follow John to that beach, we need to understand who he was trying to reach. We need to understand the Sentinelese, because their story is far older, far more complex, and far more tragic than most people realize. Imagine an island frozen in time. An island where the Stone Age never ended, where people hunt with bows and arrows, where fire is used but maybe not understood, where every face is a stranger, because for 60,000 years, the only people you have ever seen are your own family, your own tribe. This is North Sentinel Island, and the people who live here, the Sentinelese, are one of the last uncontacted tribes on Earth. Uncontacted. That word gets used a lot. But what does it really mean? It means that these people have chosen, actively chosen, to remain isolated from the rest of humanity. It means that while the world has built cities and invented the internet and sent rockets to Mars, the Sentinelese have continued living as their ancestors lived millennia ago. Scientists believe they have been on this island for at least 60,000 years, possibly longer. They are descendants of some of the first humans to migrate out of Africa. When their ancestors arrived, the world was a different place. Ice ages came and went. Continents shifted. Civilizations rose and fell. And through it all, the Sentinelese remained. The island itself is small, only about 24 square miles. It is covered in dense jungle, so thick that satellites cannot see through the canopy. The coastline is ringed with coral reefs that make approaching by boat extremely difficult. There are no natural harbors, no easy landing spots. It is as if the island itself is designed to keep people out. And for most of history, that is exactly what happened. The Sentinelese were left alone. Ships passed by in the distance. Other tribes on neighboring islands developed contact with outsiders. But North Sentinel remained untouched, a mystery, a blank spot on the map, but legends grew. Sailors told stories about the island, about people who appeared on the beach when ships came too close, about arrows flying from the jungle, about strange lights at night. Some stories were true. Others were exaggerated, but all of them sent the same message: stay away. Then, in the 1800s, the British arrived in the Andaman Islands. They were interested in colonizing the region, in establishing a presence in the Indian Ocean. And they were curious about North Sentinel. So in 1880, a British naval officer named Maurice Vidal Portman organized an expedition. Portman was an anthropologist, or at least he considered himself one. He was fascinated by the tribes of the Andamans, but his methods were, by modern standards, horrifying. He believed that the best way to study people was to take them by force. So Portman and his men landed on North Sentinel Island with guns and determination. The Sentinelese fled into the jungle. Portman's men searched for hours, crashing through the undergrowth, until they found a small group hiding. An elderly couple and 4 children. Portman kidnapped all 6 of them. He took them off the island, onto his ship, and then to Port Blair, the main town in the Andamans. He wanted to study them, to learn their language, to understand their culture. But the elderly couple fell ill almost immediately. Within days they were dead, killed by diseases their immune systems had never encountered. Diseases that most people survive easily. A cold, a flu, something minor to us, fatal to them. Portman panicked. He did not want the children to die too, so he loaded them with gifts, trinkets, and tools, and sent them back to the island. He hoped this would build goodwill, that the Sentinelese would see the gifts and understand that the British meant no harm. Instead, it had the opposite effect. The Sentinelese learned a terrible lesson. Outsiders bring death. Outsiders cannot be trusted. Outsiders must be driven away. From that moment on, the tribe became even more hostile. Any ship that came close was met with arrows. Any attempt to land was met with violence. The Sentinelese had decided they would protect their island. They would protect their people, at any cost. For decades, the world left them alone. The British eventually moved on. India gained independence, and the Sentinelese remained isolated, a curiosity mentioned in anthropology textbooks but otherwise forgotten. Until 1967. That year, the Indian government decided it was time to try again. Not to colonize, not to kidnap, but to study, to reach out, to see if peaceful contact was possible. What happened next would span more than 2 decades, and it would be one of the strangest, most delicate experiments in human history. An attempt to bridge a gap of 60,000 years. An attempt to say hello to people who had spent their entire existence saying no. 1967. The Indian government sends a team of anthropologists to North Sentinel Island. Their mission is simple: observe, do not interfere. Do not force contact. Just try to understand. The team approaches by boat, staying offshore. They watch through binoculars as figures appear on the beach. The Sentinelese stare back. For hours, the 2 groups watch each other. Neither moves closer. The researchers leave gifts on a raft and push it toward shore. The Sentinelese ignore it. The raft drifts back out to sea. The researchers return the next day, and the next, and the next. For months, they visit the island, bringing coconuts, bananas, and other food. Sometimes the Sentinelese take the gifts. Sometimes they throw them back. Sometimes they shoot arrows. It is impossible to predict, but the researchers are patient. They know they are attempting something unprecedented, and so they keep trying. In 1970, the team makes a breakthrough. Sort of. They manage to land on the beach, but the moment their feet touch the sand, the Sentinelese retreat into the jungle. The researchers leave gifts and withdraw. When they return the next day, the gifts are gone. Progress, maybe. Or maybe the Sentinelese just wanted the coconuts. But then, in 1974, something goes wrong. A documentary film crew joins the researchers. They want to capture this historic moment on camera. The team approaches the island. The Sentinelese appear on the beach. But this time, they are not curious. They are angry. Arrows fly. One strikes a crew member in the thigh. The boat retreats quickly, and the injured man survives. But the message is clear. The Sentinelese do not want cameras. They do not want crowds. They do not want to be a spectacle. The researchers reduce their numbers. They visit less frequently. They bring only coconuts, nothing else. And slowly, over the next decade, a fragile routine develops. The Sentinelese tolerate the visits. They take the coconuts. They do not attack. But they also do not invite the researchers onto the island. The beach is the boundary. The researchers stay on their boat. The Sentinelese stay on their land. This continues for 17 years. 17 years of coconuts and caution. 17 years of trying to build trust with a people who have every reason not to trust. And then, in 1991, something remarkable happens. Something that has never happened before and has never happened since. The researchers approach the island as usual. They expect the normal routine. Stay on the boat. Push the coconuts toward shore. Wait for the Sentinelese to take them. But this time, the Sentinelese do something different. They walk into the water. They wade out toward the boat, not with weapons, not with hostility. They reach for the coconuts. They smile. They gesture for the researchers to come closer. The researchers are stunned. Some of them jump into the water. They stand waist deep, handing coconuts directly to the Sentinelese. For the first time in recorded history, the two groups are interacting peacefully, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as something almost resembling friends. One researcher, a man named T.N. Pandit, wades closer to the shore than the others. A young Sentinelese boy approaches him. The boy is holding a knife. He mimics cutting his own throat, then points at Pandit. Pandit freezes. Is this a threat? The boy does it again. The gesture is unmistakable. Pandit retreats. The moment is over. The researchers return to their boat. The Sentinelese return to their island. And despite that one strange moment, everyone agrees. This was a success, a breakthrough. After 17 years, the Sentinelese had finally opened the door. But the Indian government made a decision, a controversial decision. They decided to stop, to end the contact missions, to leave the Sentinelese alone permanently. Why? Because even peaceful contact was dangerous. The researchers had been tested for diseases before every visit. They had been careful, but they could never eliminate the risk entirely, and the Sentinelese had no immunity. A single infection, something harmless to the researchers, could wipe out the entire tribe. So in 1991, the Indian government declared North Sentinel Island a protected zone. It became illegal to visit, illegal to approach within 3 miles. The Coast Guard began patrolling the waters. Signs were posted. The message was clear. This island is off limits, forever. For a while, it seemed like the story was over. The Sentinelese would remain isolated. The world would respect their choice, and everyone would move on. But in 2004, something happened that reminded the world that the Sentinelese were still there, and that they were still fiercely protective of their home. A massive tsunami struck the Indian Ocean. Waves as tall as buildings crashed into coastlines across the region. Hundreds of thousands of people died. Entire villages were erased, and the Andaman Islands were hit hard. The Indian government sent helicopters to check on the tribes, including the Sentinelese. They feared the worst, that the tsunami had killed them all. But when the helicopters flew over North Sentinel Island, they saw something incredible. A lone Sentinelese man standing on the beach. He looked up at the helicopter, and then he drew his bow and fired an arrow at it. The Sentinelese had survived, and they still did not want help. The government tried to deliver aid anyway. They flew low and dropped supplies. The Sentinelese shot more arrows. The government gave up. If the tribe did not want help, forcing it on them would only make things worse. 2 years later, in 2006, the island made headlines again. 2 fishermen, drunk and fishing illegally, drifted too close to the shore. Their boat ran aground. The Sentinelese found them, and killed them both. The Indian government sent a helicopter to recover the bodies, but the Sentinelese would not allow it. They stood on the beach, weapons ready, daring anyone to land. The government decided it was not worth the fight. The fishermen's bodies were left where they fell. The world was reminded once again. North Sentinel Island is not a tourist destination. It is not a curiosity. It is a home, and the people who live there will defend it with their lives. Which brings us back to John Allen Chau. Because by 2018, the island had been off limits for nearly 3 decades. The Sentinelese had made their position clear over and over again. They did not want visitors. They did not want contact. They wanted to be left alone. But John believed he was different. He believed he could succeed where others had failed. He believed God would protect him. He believed the Sentinelese needed what he had to offer, and he believed the risk was worth it. So in November 2018, John made his move. He hired fishermen. He prepared his gear, and he set out to do the impossible. My fellow Fated Clues detectives, what do you think drove John to ignore every warning? Was it faith? Was it arrogance? Or was it something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, every mystery deserves to be explored. Hit that like button and let us continue. November 14th, 2018. The night is dark and quiet. A small fishing boat leaves the coast of the Andaman Islands under cover of darkness. On board are 7 local fishermen, and 1 American, John Allen Chau. The fishermen are nervous. They know what they are doing is illegal. Approaching North Sentinel Island is banned. The Coast Guard patrols these waters regularly. If they are caught, they will go to jail. But John has paid them well. More than they would make in months. Enough to take the risk. John sits in the boat, his backpack beside him. Inside are supplies, a Bible, gifts for the Sentinelese, dried fish, scissors, safety pins, things he thinks they might find useful. He also has a small waterproof bag with his journal, his passport, and a letter. A letter addressed to his family. Just in case, the boat moves slowly through the dark water. No lights, no engine noise, just the sound of oars cutting through the waves. They are trying to avoid detection, trying to stay invisible, because if the Coast Guard spots them, it is over before it starts. Hours pass, and then as the sun begins to rise, the fishermen point. There it is, North Sentinel Island, a dark smudge on the horizon, growing larger. The jungle rises like a wall. The beaches glow white in the morning light. It looks peaceful, beautiful even, but John knows better. He knows what happened to the fishermen in 2006. He knows about the arrows, the hostility, the deaths. He has read every report, every article, every first-hand account he could find. He knows this is the most dangerous thing he has ever done. But he also believes it is the most important. The boat stops about half a mile from shore. The fishermen refuse to go closer. They have done their part. They have brought John here, but they will not risk their lives any further. John understands. He does not argue. Instead, he pulls out his kayak, a small, inflatable kayak that he has been practicing with for months. He loads it with his supplies, checks his gear, and climbs in. The fishermen watch him nervously. They think he is insane. Maybe he is. John begins to paddle, slowly, steadily, toward the shore. Toward the island that has killed everyone who tried to visit uninvited. His heart is pounding. His hands are shaking, but he does not turn back. As he gets closer, he sees movement. Figures emerging from the jungle. The Sentinelese. They stand on the beach watching him. Some are holding bows. Others carry spears. They do not look welcoming. John stops paddling. He is maybe 100 meters from shore now, close enough to see their faces, close enough to hear them shouting. They are yelling in their language, a language no one outside the island understands. But the tone is clear. They are angry. They are warning him. They are telling him to leave. John tries to call out to them. He shouts in English, the only language he knows. "My name is John. I love you. Jesus loves you." He holds up a fish, one of the gifts he brought. He throws it toward the shore. A peace offering. The Sentinelese do not take it. Instead, they raise their bows. Arrows are knocked, aimed, and then one of them fires. The arrow flies through the air. It does not hit John, but it comes close. Too close. John panics. He turns his kayak around and paddles as fast as he can back to the boat. His first attempt has failed, but he is not done. That afternoon, John tries again. The fishermen beg him not to. They tell him he will die. They tell him the Sentinelese have made their answer clear. But John is determined. He believes that with patience, with persistence, the Sentinelese will understand. They will see that he means no harm. They will listen. He loads his kayak again. This time he brings more gifts. Fish, scissors, a mirror. Things he thinks might intrigue them. He paddles toward the shore. The Sentinelese are waiting. This time, John makes it onto the beach. His feet touch the sand. He is on North Sentinel Island. He has crossed the boundary. 3 men approach him. They are naked except for simple belts and necklaces. They carry bows and spears. They are talking to each other, gesturing at John. They do not look happy, but they do not immediately attack. John tries to talk to them. He repeats the phrases he has practiced. "I am a friend. I come in peace. I love you. Jesus loves you." He offers them the gifts. He smiles. He tries to look non-threatening. The men do not respond. Or rather, they respond in their own language, shouting words John cannot understand. The situation is tense, confusing. John does not know if they are about to accept him or kill him. And then, a boy appears. A young boy, maybe 12 or 13 years old. He walks up to John. He is holding a bow. He raises it and fires. The arrow flies. It does not hit John. Instead, it hits the Bible he is holding. The Bible in his hands. The arrow pierces the cover and lodges in the pages. John stares at it, shocked, terrified. The symbolism is not lost on him. The Sentinelese have shot his Bible. They have rejected his message before he even had a chance to deliver it. John drops the Bible. He backs away. The boy knocks another arrow. This one might not miss. John turns and runs. He sprints toward the water, toward his kayak. But the Sentinelese are faster. They grab the kayak. They pull it away from him. John has no choice. He dives into the water and swims. The boat is a kilometer away. The water is cold. He swims as fast as he can, his heart pounding, expecting at any moment to feel an arrow in his back, but the arrow never comes. The Sentinelese watch him swim away. They have taken his kayak. They have made their point. They let him live. This time, John reaches the boat, exhausted and shaken. The fishermen pull him aboard. They are furious. They tell him it is over. They tell him they are leaving and never coming back. They tell him he is lucky to be alive. But John is not ready to give up. Not yet. because in his mind the Sentinelese did not kill him. They could have. They had plenty of chances, but they let him live, twice. To John, that means something. It means there is still hope. It means he can try again. The fishermen refuse. They say they are done. They say they are going back to the Andamans and never returning to this cursed island. But John convinces them. He pays them more money. He promises this will be the last time. He tells them he just needs one more chance. Just one. Reluctantly, the fishermen agree. They will bring him back. One last time. 2 days later, on November 17th, they return to North Sentinel Island. But this time, John has a different plan. He thinks the problem was the boat. He thinks the Sentinelese saw the boat and felt threatened. So this time, he asks the fishermen to drop him off and leave. Completely leave. He will swim to the island alone. He will stay there. He will live with the Sentinelese. He will not come back. The fishermen think he has lost his mind. They beg him to reconsider. But John is resolute. He hands them a letter. A letter for his friend Alex, another missionary in the Andamans. He hands them his journal. He tells them to deliver it if he does not return. And then he says something that will haunt the fishermen forever. He says, quote, "You guys might think I am crazy, but I think this is worth it. If I die, do not blame God. Do not blame the Sentinelese. This is my choice." End quote. And then he jumps into the water and swims toward the island. Alone. The fishermen watch him go. They do not know what to do. So they sail away, as John asked, but they do not go far. They anchor a safe distance away, out of sight, and they wait. Hours pass. They see smoke rising from the jungle. They hear distant shouts. And then, nothing. Silence. The fishermen wait until evening. Then, unable to bear the uncertainty, they sail back toward the island. They stay far offshore, peering through binoculars as the sun sets, and that is when they see it. A group of Sentinelese men on the beach, dragging a body wearing modern clothes. They drag it to the edge of the jungle and begin to dig. John Allen Chau is dead. The island has claimed him, just like it claimed the fishermen before him, just like it has claimed everyone who tried to visit uninvited. The fishermen sail away, horrified. They go straight to John's friend Alex and give him the letter and journal. Alex reads them and immediately contacts the authorities. Within hours, the Indian government and the American consulate are involved. The news spreads, and the world learns that a young American missionary has been killed on North Sentinel Island. The news breaks like a shockwave. An American killed by an isolated tribe. A missionary martyred on a forbidden island. The story is everywhere. News channels, social media, newspapers around the world. Everyone has an opinion. Some call John a hero, a martyr who died trying to spread his faith, a brave soul who gave his life for what he believed in. Churches hold vigils. His friends share stories of his kindness, his passion, his unwavering conviction. They say he died doing what he loved, what he believed God called him to do. But others are less sympathetic. They call John reckless, arrogant, a colonizer trying to force his beliefs on people who did not want them. They point out that he broke the law, that he ignored every warning, that he put not only himself at risk, but the Sentinelese as well. What if he had been carrying a disease? What if his visit had wiped out the entire tribe? The debate rages online. Is John a martyr or a fool? Is he a victim or a trespasser? Did he die for his faith? Or did he die because he refused to respect a boundary that had been clearly drawn? The Indian government moves quickly. They arrest the 7 fishermen who brought John to the island. They are charged with helping him break the law. The fishermen cooperate fully. They tell the police everything. They hand over John's journal and letters. They describe what they saw. And then the difficult question arises. What about John's body? He is still there, buried on the beach. Should the Indian government try to recover it? Should they send a team to retrieve the body and bring it home to his family? The answer is no. The government consults with anthropologists, with experts on the Sentinelese. Everyone agrees. Attempting to recover John's body would require force. It would require confronting the Sentinelese, possibly with weapons. It would risk another death or multiple deaths, and it would violate the very principle the law was designed to protect. The Sentinelese right to be left alone. John's family is devastated, but they issue a statement. They say they forgive the Sentinelese. They say John knew the risks. They say they do not want anyone to blame the tribe or seek revenge. They ask for privacy, and they ask that the Sentinelese be left in peace. The American government also weighs in. They state that the Sentinelese acted in self-defense, that John was trespassing on their land, that they had every right to protect their home. No charges will be filed. No pressure will be placed on India to investigate or prosecute. For the Sentinelese, this is the correct decision. But it leaves John's family with no closure, no body to bury, no grave to visit, just the knowledge that their son, their brother, is lying on a beach half a world away, in a place they can never go. The fishermen are eventually released with minimal punishment. The Indian government recognizes that they were manipulated by John, who offered them money they desperately needed. They are fined and warned never to approach the island again. And then the focus shifts. The conversation moves beyond John. It moves to a bigger, more complex question. What do we owe to isolated tribes? What is our responsibility to people who have chosen to remain outside of modern civilization? Some argue that isolation is not really a choice, that the Sentinelese are trapped in the Stone Age, denied access to medicine, technology, and knowledge that could improve their lives. They argue that contact, done carefully and respectfully, could be beneficial, that leaving them isolated is abandonment, not protection. But others disagree strongly. They point to history, to the countless indigenous tribes that were contacted, converted, and destroyed, to the diseases that wiped out entire populations, to the loss of culture, language, and identity that followed colonization. They argue that the Sentinelese have survived for 60,000 years, precisely because they have been left alone, and that the greatest gift we can give them is to continue leaving them alone. Dr. T.N. Pandit, the researcher who spent 17 years trying to build trust with the Sentinelese, speaks out. He says the tribe is not violent by nature. They are defensive, protective. They have learned through painful experience that outsiders bring death, and so they keep outsiders away. It is not aggression. It is survival. Pandit also says something else. Something important. He says the Sentinelese deserve the right to choose. And they have chosen. Over and over again they have chosen isolation. They have chosen to say no. And we have a moral obligation to respect that choice. International law agrees. The Sentinelese are recognized as a sovereign people. Their island is their territory, and trespassing on their land without permission is a violation of their rights, just as trespassing on anyone's land would be. But the debate does not end, because John's story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. Truths about belief and boundaries, about the line between helping and imposing, about the difference between courage and recklessness, and it forces us to ask, what would we have done if we believed, truly believed, that a group of people needed help? Would we respect their refusal? Or would we try anyway, convinced that we knew better? After John's death, his journal and letters were made public. His family shared them, hoping to show the world who John really was. Not a reckless adventurer, not a colonizer, but a young man who genuinely believed he was doing something good, something necessary. The journal is heartbreaking. Page after page of prayers and plans, doubts and determination. John was not blind to the danger. He knew he might die. He wrote about it constantly. In one entry he wrote, quote, "What makes this worthwhile? It is the eternal life that Jesus promises. I do not want to die, but I am willing to if it means the Sentinelese can know the love of Christ." End quote. In another he wrote, quote, "I have been so nice to these people. Why are they so angry? Do they not see I am trying to help?" End quote. This line is particularly revealing, because it shows John's mindset. He saw his mission as help. He saw himself as bringing something valuable, something the Sentinelese needed. He could not understand why they would reject it. But to the Sentinelese, John was not a helper. He was an invader, a stranger forcing his way into their home, shouting words they did not understand, bringing objects they did not want, disrupting their lives. John's inability to see this perspective is not unique. It is a pattern that is repeated throughout history. Missionaries, explorers, colonizers, all believing they were helping, all convinced that their culture, their religion, their way of life was superior, and all blind to the harm they were causing. But John was not a monster. He was not cruel or malicious. He genuinely believed he was saving souls. He genuinely thought the Sentinelese would thank him once they understood. He was wrong, but his intentions were not evil. This is what makes his story so tragic. Because there is no clear villain here. John was not evil. The Sentinelese were not evil. But a young man is dead, and a tribe that wanted nothing more than to be left alone has been thrust back into the global spotlight. John's final letter to his family is the hardest to read. He wrote it on the boat, just before his last attempt to reach the island. He knew it might be the last thing he ever wrote. He wrote, quote, "I love you all. I know you will be sad if I do not come back. But please do not be angry at God or the Sentinelese. This is my choice. This is my calling. I would rather die trying to bring the gospel to these people than live a long life without purpose. Pray for them. Pray that they will come to know Jesus." End quote. He signed it, quote, "All my love, John." End quote. His family received that letter days after his death. They read his words. They mourned. And then they did what John asked. They forgave. They asked others not to blame the Sentinelese. They honored his memory by respecting his wishes. But not everyone agreed with that approach. Some Christians saw John as a martyr. They held him up as an example of ultimate faith. Some even said they wanted to continue his mission, to finish what he started. This terrified anthropologists and Indian officials, because if more people tried to reach the Sentinelese, more people would die. The tribe had made their position clear. They would defend their home, and the Indian government would not stop them. International Christian organizations eventually stepped in. They released statements discouraging anyone from trying to contact the Sentinelese. They said that while they admired John's faith, his approach was misguided. They said that respecting boundaries was part of respecting people, and that forcing religion on anyone, even with good intentions, was wrong. But the damage was done. North Sentinel Island was back in the news. Tourists became curious. Adventurers started talking about visiting. The Indian Coast Guard had to increase patrols. More signs were posted. More warnings were issued. The Sentinelese, who had just wanted to be left alone, were now more famous than ever. And that fame brought danger, because fame brings curiosity, and curiosity brings trespassers. John Allen Chau's story is unique, but it is also part of a much larger pattern, a pattern of contact between isolated tribes and the outside world, and almost every time that contact ends badly. There are about 100 uncontacted tribes left on Earth. Most are in the Amazon rainforest, a few are in Papua New Guinea, and one, the Sentinelese, is in the Indian Ocean. These tribes have survived, against all odds, in a world that is rapidly shrinking. But they are under constant threat. Loggers invade their lands, miners search for resources, tourists want photos, missionaries want converts, and governments want to integrate them into modern society. Some tribes have no choice. Their lands are destroyed, they are forced into contact, and the results are devastating. Diseases wipe out huge percentages of their population. Their cultures are lost. Their languages die. Within a generation or two, they are absorbed into mainstream society, and something irreplaceable is gone forever. But a few tribes, like the Sentinelese, have managed to hold on. They have managed to keep the world at bay. And the question is, should we let them? There are good arguments on both sides. On one hand, isolation means no modern medicine. If someone in the tribe gets seriously ill, they will likely die. We could save them. We have antibiotics, vaccines, doctors. We could help. But on the other hand, contact means exposure. Exposure to diseases they cannot fight. Exposure to ideas that could fracture their society. Exposure to a world that has a long history of exploiting indigenous people. History is full of examples of tribes that were contacted with good intentions and destroyed by the consequences. The Tasmanian Aboriginal people, the many tribes of the Amazon, the Native Americans. Over and over, contact has led to catastrophe. So the international community has, for the most part, agreed on a policy. If a tribe wants to remain isolated, let them. Do not force contact. Protect their lands. Keep outsiders away. Respect their choice. This policy is called, quote, no contact, end quote. And it is the policy that protects the Sentinelese. But it is not a perfect policy, because it means accepting that people will die from preventable causes. It means accepting that there are people living without electricity, without medicine, without even basic knowledge of the wider world. And for some, that feels wrong. It feels like abandonment. But the alternative, forced contact, feels worse, because forced contact is colonialism by another name. It is saying, quote, we know what is best for you, whether you want it or not. End quote. And the Sentinelese have made their answer to that very clear. There is another argument, though, an argument that is harder to dismiss. What if the Sentinelese do not fully understand what they are rejecting? What if they do not know about medicine that could save their children? What if they do not know about technologies that could make their lives easier? Can they truly make an informed choice if they do not know what their options are? It is a compelling point, but it assumes something dangerous. It assumes that our way of life is better, that modern civilization is superior, that the Sentinelese would choose it if only they understood it. But maybe they would not. Maybe they have everything they need. Food from the jungle and the sea, shelter, community, a way of life that has sustained them for thousands of years. Maybe they look at the outside world with its pollution and war and inequality and think, quote, no thank you, end quote. We cannot know, because we cannot ask them. And that is the point. The only way to find out would be to force contact. And forcing contact is exactly what we have agreed not to do. So we are left with uncertainty. We are left with a tribe that we know almost nothing about. A tribe that continues to live as their ancestors lived, in a world that has moved on without them. And we are left with questions. Questions about progress and preservation, about autonomy and paternalism, about whether it is possible to help someone who does not want to be helped. John Allen Chau believed he had the answers. He believed he was helping. He believed the Sentinelese would thank him once they understood. He was wrong, and it cost him his life. But his story is not just a tragedy. It is a lesson about the limits of good intentions, about the importance of listening, even when the answer is no, about the need to respect boundaries, even when we do not agree with them. Because in the end, the Sentinelese are not a mystery to be solved. They are not a puzzle to be figured out. They are people. People with agency. People with the right to choose. And they have chosen. Today, North Sentinel Island remains off limits. The Indian government's policy has not changed. Approaching within 3 miles of the shore is illegal. The Coast Guard patrols regularly, and the Sentinelese are left alone. After John's death, there was pressure to increase restrictions even further, to make the penalties harsher, to ensure that no one else would try what he tried. But the Indian government decided that the laws were already sufficient. The problem was not the laws. The problem was people who chose to ignore them. Since 2018, there have been no more incidents, no more attempted visits, no more trespassers. The world has, for the most part, moved on. The Sentinelese are once again forgotten, which is exactly what they want. But the island is not truly isolated. Modern technology can see things that were invisible a generation ago. Satellites orbit overhead constantly. High-resolution cameras capture images of the island. Drones could, in theory, fly over and film the Sentinelese without ever setting foot on the beach. The Indian government has banned this. It is illegal to photograph or film the Sentinelese without permission, which, of course, they will never give. This law is designed to protect the tribe's privacy, to ensure that even if we cannot physically leave them alone, we can at least leave them digitally alone. But the temptation remains. Because the Sentinelese are one of the last true mysteries on Earth. We live in a world where everything is documented. Every corner of the planet has been explored, photographed, mapped, except this one small island, this one small tribe. And for some people, that mystery is irresistible. There are still adventurers who talk about visiting. There are still missionaries who believe they are called to reach the Sentinelese. There are still tourists who want to see them with their own eyes. The Indian Coast Guard turns them all away, but the desire persists, and so the Sentinelese remain, living their lives unaware of the fascination they inspire. They wake up each day on their island. They hunt, they gather food, they raise their children, they tell their stories. They live as their ancestors lived. Do they remember John Allen Chau? Do they tell stories about the strange man who came from the sea, shouting words they did not understand, bringing objects they did not want? Or have they forgotten him already? One more outsider among many, one more threat turned away. We do not know. We will never know, because we cannot ask them. And that is how it should be. But we can remember. We can remember John. We can remember his passion, his conviction, his belief that he was doing something good. We can remember his tragedy. And we can learn from it. We can learn that not every place is ours to explore, that not every person wants our help, that not every boundary is meant to be crossed. We can learn that good intentions are not enough. That belief, no matter how strong, does not give us the right to impose ourselves on others. And we can learn that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is nothing. The hardest choice we can make is to walk away, to respect a no, to accept that there are things we will never understand, places we will never go, people we will never meet. The Sentinelese have drawn a line that is held for 60,000 years, a line that has been tested countless times, a line that has cost lives, and that line is still there, still holding, still protecting a way of life that the rest of the world has long since abandoned. North Sentinel Island is small, tiny, really. You could walk across it in a few hours, but it represents something enormous. It represents the last truly isolated people on Earth, the last humans living completely outside of modern civilization. How much longer will they last? Will they survive another century? Another millennium? Or will the outside world eventually overwhelm them, despite our best efforts to keep them safe? No one knows. But for now they endure. A reminder that the world is bigger and stranger than we usually acknowledge. A reminder that there are still mysteries, still unknowns, still places where the modern world has not reached. And maybe, just maybe, that is something worth protecting. Not because the Sentinelese need our protection, but because we need the reminder that we do not control everything, that we do not know everything, that there are limits to our reach. John Allen Chau crossed that limit, and the island answered, swift, final, unmistakable. The island is still there. The Sentinelese are still there. And John Allen Chau is still there too, buried in the sand. A permanent reminder of what happens when conviction collides with reality. So what do we take from this story? What lessons does the tragedy of John Allen Chau teach us? First, we learn that boundaries matter. The Sentinelese drew a boundary. They drew it with arrows and spears. They drew it with the bodies of those who tried to cross it. And they have maintained that boundary for generations. John chose to ignore it. He believed his mission was more important than their wishes. He was wrong. Boundaries exist for a reason. Personal boundaries, cultural boundaries, legal boundaries. They are not arbitrary lines drawn to inconvenience us. They are expressions of autonomy, of self-determination, of the right to say no. When we cross boundaries without permission, we are not being brave. We are not being heroic. We are being disrespectful. And sometimes, as John learned, that disrespect has consequences. Second, we learn that good intentions do not justify harmful actions. John believed he was helping. He believed he was saving souls. He believed he was doing God's work. And maybe in his heart he was. But belief does not erase harm. The Sentinelese did not want his help. They did not ask for it. They did not need it. And by forcing it on them anyway, John was not acting out of love. He was acting out of arrogance. The arrogance of thinking he knew what was best for them. The arrogance of thinking his beliefs were more important than their autonomy. This is a lesson that extends far beyond this one story. It applies to charity work, to international aid, to cultural exchange, to any situation where one group tries to help another. Good intentions are not enough. We must also have humility. We must also have respect. We must also have the wisdom to listen when someone says no. Third, we learn that culture is not something to be erased. It is something to be respected. The Sentinelese have a culture, a language, a way of life. It is not our way of life. It is not modern. It is not connected to the internet or powered by electricity, but it is theirs, and it has sustained them for 60,000 years. Who are we to say it is inferior? Who are we to decide that they need to change? The impulse to civilize indigenous people has caused immeasurable harm throughout history. It has destroyed languages, shattered communities, and erased entire cultures. And it continues today, whenever we assume that our way is the right way. The Sentinelese are not stuck in the past. They are living their present, and they have every right to continue doing so. Fourth, we learn that contact is not always a gift. For decades, well-meaning people have argued that isolated tribes would benefit from contact, that they would gain access to medicine, education, technology, that their lives would improve. But contact is a double-edged sword. Yes, it can bring benefits, but it also brings diseases, exploitation, the loss of land and autonomy, the destruction of traditional ways of life. For many tribes, contact has been catastrophic, and the Sentinelese know this. They have seen what happened to their neighbors. They have learned from history, and they have decided the risk is not worth it. We should respect that decision, even if we disagree, even if we think we know better, because ultimately it is not our decision to make. Finally, we learn that some mysteries do not need to be solved. We live in an age of information, an age where everything can be researched, documented, explained. We are uncomfortable with unknowns. We want answers. We want understanding. But the Sentinelese are not a problem to be solved. They are not a mystery to be unraveled. They are people who want to be left alone, and sometimes the most respectful thing we can do is honor that wish. John Allen Chau was a young man with a dream that many would call noble, a dream of spreading his faith, of sharing what he believed was the most important message in the world. He was not a bad person. He was not intentionally cruel. He was, in many ways, admirable. His dedication, his courage, his willingness to risk everything for what he believed in. But courage without wisdom is recklessness, and conviction without respect is arrogance. John had courage and conviction in abundance, but he lacked the wisdom to see that his dream was not compatible with the Sentinelese reality. He lacked the humility to accept that no means no, and so he died, on a beach, on an island that did not want him, buried by people who saw him not as a savior, but as a threat. His death was a tragedy, a waste of a young life, a source of pain for his family and friends. But it was also avoidable. If John had listened to the warnings, if he had respected the law, if he had accepted that some boundaries cannot and should not be crossed, he would be alive today. The Sentinelese did not murder John Allen Chau. They defended their home. They protected their people. They enforced a boundary that has stood for thousands of years. And while it is tragic that a young man died, it would be wrong to blame them for his death. John made a choice to cross a line that should not have been crossed, and he paid the price. My fellow Fated Clues detectives, we have reached the end of this story. A story with no easy answers. A story that forces us to question our assumptions about help and harm, about faith and respect, about the right to explore and the right to be left alone. What do you think? Was John a martyr or a cautionary tale? Do the Sentinelese have the right to remain isolated? Or do we have a responsibility to reach out, even when our help is unwanted? Share your thoughts below. Discuss, debate, reflect. And remember, not every mystery needs to be solved. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is respect the unknown, to leave some doors closed, to honor some boundaries. North Sentinel Island remains, the Sentinelese remain, and the world, at last, is learning to leave them alone. Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of the most complex and tragic stories of our time. If this video made you think, made you question, made you feel something, then it served its purpose. Hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe to Fated Clues, where we explore the mysteries that challenge us, the cases that change us, and the stories that stay with us long after they end. Until next time, detectives, stay curious, stay respectful, and remember, some lines are drawn for a reason.